Dan Deming of KKM Financial joins us now. And Dan, I suspect that traders and investors will continue to digest what Fed Chairman Jerome Powell had to say on Friday. But now the Fed actually goes into a quiet period ahead of the FOMC meeting.
Yeah. So, it was, it's going to be an interesting week and a half, Angie. Now, we do have a lot of data points that the Fed will probably focus in on, even though they're in the quiet period. And you've got retail sales, PPI, CPI this week. So those are the three big numbers, I think, again, when the Fed is looking at that inflation front. Now, last Friday in that jobs report, even though the non-farm payroll is a little lower than expected, we did get an increase in income, and that year-over-year income number keeps creeping higher and higher. So I think that's something the Fed is very focused on, that there is the potential there for at least, further expenditures by the consumer moving forward when you see those income numbers increasing.
Right, income numbers good for Americans. But the work week hours a little sluggish. That means people are working less. Is that a sign of recession?
No, I don't think so, Angie. I think, it's interesting because Larry Kudlow came out and defended that immensely last week, and because of productivity. I mean, he basically said, hey, you continue to see productivity gains, and to some degree, I think that's a viable argument there. And I also want to point out that even though the unemployment report stayed at 3.7%, we did see labor participation actually uptick. So we got more workers coming into the market, and yet we still stayed at 3.7%. So I think that's another positive.
How do you play the market?
This week, I think you just got to kind of ride it out. I mean, certainly the fact that we are back above from a relative strength standpoint, a lot of these indexes now pushing back up towards their highs, and I think that's a positive, certainly. And the trough of this last move wasn't quite as steep as it was when we saw in May. So I think you're still going to continue to see this upward trajectory.
But what about the trade situation here?
Yeah, I think that's the trade situation is definitely going to be in focus this week. Now, last week we got some positive news, helped propel the equity markets higher, breaking through the 50-day moving average when you look at the S&P 500. That's a key thing, I think. So that relative strength is now shifting back towards the upside, and a continuing strong narrative there as we now move towards an October meeting, a little bit more concrete. I think that's a short-term positive for the market. So I think this week the market certainly has changed its momentum. I think the psychology in the market shifted, so it looks like it wants to go higher.
Good. Thanks so much for coming on the show today.
All right. Thanks for having me.
For more Business First AM, check us out on social media. We're on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And go to businessfirstam.com for where to see our show on TV.